So that's all detailed here. Okay, and with that, I'll now pass over to Jen.
Hello, thank you very much. So some of these are a little bit repetitive of what's just been spoken by Gavin, but it's always nice to go over it again anyway. But every interview differs, and more often than not, interviews tend to consist of two parts: the formal question and answer session, and also assessment of your skills or your knowledge. So I've broken it down into these two parts, starting with the question and answer section. And the biggest piece of advice that I can give that has been covered by both Nicola and Gavin is to prepare, prepare, and then prepare again. Your questions for your interview, similarly to your application, will be based on the job description and the personal specification. So just a reminder to use that when you're preparing for your interview, for your questions. Go through every single point that's down on that personal specification and consider how your skills align with what's required for the job role. A common mistake that we see a lot in applicants is they prepare for the job role they have now, rather than looking at the skills and experience they have now and how they align with the job role they want to do. If there's anything within that personal specification that you're unsure about, whether that be an analyzer or a technique, make sure you research and read up on that beforehand. So if you are asked about those particular skills, you do have answers prepared for them. And consider potential examples, as both Gavin and Nicola have mentioned, for each point that could be used in your interview. This adds depth to your questions and adds additional marks. So, for example, if you're asked what a PCR is, don't just give a theoretical answer of what a PCR is. You could start with, I used PCR in my final year project to dash, dash, dash. This involved dash, dash, dash. So you're backing up that you understand what PCR is with an example from your own experience. So communication and personal attributes. Articulate clearly and take your time to answer your questions. Take a breath and gather your thoughts, especially if nervous, and really think about what you're being asked so you can tailor your answer appropriately. Be proactive. Practice active listening, apologies. Use your eye contact, nod in appropriate places, and respond to any questions you're asked, and be confident. Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially if you need something clarifying or repeating. We're not here to try and trip people up. We're trying to get the best from you. So we do not mind at all if you need some clarification. Be self-aware of your skills and strengths and weaknesses. List them as part of your prep and consider what you're doing to develop those skills further. And also consider what your weaknesses are and how you're addressing those and developing on those points. Be honest and with regards to your experience and skills. As interviewees, we understand the level of experience that's needed for each role. If you're going for a trainee post, for example, we don't expect you to have extensive knowledge, specialist knowledge or experience, so don't lie. It'll be obvious, but also don't answer with a simple, I have no experience. This is where your prep comes into play. You can say that you don't have an experience on a specific analyzer or technique, but you can show that you've read around that analyzer or technique and that you have an awareness and that you have taken that time to look into that process. Professionalism. So this was mentioned as well. Be punctual. It might seem really obvious, but we have had countless people turn up late for interviews without offering apologies or an explanation of why. This should be part of your prep. Prep your journey. Do you know where you're going? Do you know how to get there? Do you know where the department is? Hospitals can be big, confusing, maze-like places. So build that into your time when you're preparing to go for an interview. But we do understand that things happen if your train is delayed or there are train strikes, for example. We understand that, but phone the department. Make sure beforehand you know who to contact if there is an event that happens beyond your control, and phone through and apologise and explain. And most places will be understanding and will appreciate the fact you've taken that time to ring through. Consider your presentation and attire. So we've had people turn up to interviews before in jeans, crumpled t-shirts, and it doesn't give out a very good impression. And as Gavin mentioned, you are judged on those first impressions as well. and it doesn't bode well. And be polite and formal. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of the assessment of your practical skills, again, all interviews differ and you may only have a Q&A session, but in my experience of being an interviewer and interviewee, a Q&A is often backed up with some form of assessment of skills. And this could be a practical assessment, and this is quite common. This is the most common thing we use for MLA posts, AP posts, and trainee posts, and that's because these roles are more practical in nature. So we want to try and see those practical skills in practice, and they're usually things around basic lab skills. So it could be an understanding of good molecular practice, pipette use, those kind of skills. Case-based scenarios. So this was mentioned by Gavin earlier as an example that he's had. And this is where you're given a clinical case and ask questions around this clinical case. This is not usually used for MLAs or APs or trainee position because for this, you're required to demonstrate interpretive skills. And it's not until you get to those higher, more specialist roles that you need to show that you have those interpretive skills. So nothing to worry about on those first jobs. Another might be a lab result analysis, where you're given a data set of results and asked questions on how to interpret, or can you see any problems with the results? Again, it usually tends to be more specialist roles that this is used because, again, it's an assessment of interpretation and the ability to troubleshoot. Another more common method that is used for MLAs, APs, and trainees is the oral presentation. This can be unseen or pre-given, and it's more common to be pre-given your title for presentation, but we have used in the past in our department unseen presentations, and this is where you are given a topic during your interview and you're given 10 minutes to prepare your presentation. And this is really helpful from an assessor's point of view because it shows knowledge in real time. It shows us what you actually know in that real time. And it takes away any worry that somebody may have used AI to produce an oral presentation. I think candidates often find unseen presentations more scary because it's that fear of the unknown. But if you are given an unseen presentation, don't worry because there's no expectation that you have depth of knowledge with an unseen presentation. We're looking at how you deal with this kind of approach under pressure, and we're looking at you to demonstrate awarenesses of techniques or procedures. So there's no depth required. Okay, next slide, please. So as the practical is one of the most common, we can look a little bit more of the skills that are required. So be mindful of good lab practice. Again, it seems obvious, but think about the use of lab coats, gloves, goggles, PPE. And if you're not sure whether you should be wearing them in the situation, ask. Clean up any spillages. You are human, a spillage might happen, you're nervous, but if that does happen, clean it up and ask what suitable materials are available for cleaning that up. Be mindful of the practical skills that are specific for the role. So again, this is where the job description comes in handy. Look at that job description and pull out the key practical skills that are outlined in the job. If it's a molecular laboratory, you can imagine that you will be assessed on good molecular practice, or if pipettes are required, you may be assessed on using pipettes, etc. So think about what skills are needed for that job because they are the kind of skills that you will probably be examined on in the practical assessment. And ask for clarification if you need it. Again, we don't mind at all. If you read through your practical sheet and you don't understand what's required, just ask. That's absolutely fine. Don't rush. And if you make a mistake, don't panic and be honest. Everybody's human. It's a nervous environment when you're in exam, and we understand that. And the best practicals I've seen, the best candidates are people that have made a mistake partway through. They've admitted the error and they've talked through how they've made that mistake, and they've talked through how they would rectify that mistake. And to us, in an interview, that demonstrates that this candidate can recognize a mistake in practice, that they understand the importance of being honest when this happens, and then they understand the need to provide accurate results for patient care. So this is an applicant then that we feel we can place trust in. So don't worry if you do make a mistake. And finally, stay calm. We know everybody's nervous. We know this is a simulated exercise, and we know it doesn't reflect everyday life. We're not looking for perfection. We're just looking for someone that can be trained. We're looking for those basic lab skills. We're looking to make sure there are no alarm bells, and we're looking to make sure that someone's not been dishonest on an application and that the skills that they have outlined they can demonstrate. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to presentation. As mentioned, they may be unseen, but it's more common to be given the title, so we'll concentrate on these skills. And first off, it's practice. The more familiar you are with your material, the easier it will flow. And practice, don't just practice reading, practice the delivery. Stand in a room, ask somebody to go through that presentation with you. And if your interview is virtual, make sure you can use Teams. Do you know how to share your presentation? Do you know how to use the software that you're asked to use? And familiarize yourself with the words and phrases in your presentation. It shouldn't sound like the first time you've ever seen a word is when you're presenting it. Common question I'm often asked is, should you read your presentation from a script or should you remember it? And the answer is often both. Find that compromise. If you're using a script, it means that you can lose contact with your audience, it can sound less authentic, and it can reduce any energy or enthusiasm that you have as a speaker. But it is difficult to remember a speech from memory, especially if you're nervous or you're asked a question partway through, you can lose your place. So a good compromise is to have notes to hand so you can always refer to them if you need them. Okay, next page, please. Assert yourself during a presentation. Be assertive but not aggressive, and your body language is so important. Consider your posture and your facial expression and be confident in the space that you're in. If it's a physical interview, don't hide behind desks or lecterns, and consider a natural use of body language to engage with your audience. You want it to feel as authentic and natural as possible. Engage your audience with eye contact, with body language, and think about the language that you're using. Make verbal contact with your audience. So, for example, ask rhetorical questions or give the opportunity for them to ask questions at the end. Ensure that the oral commentary complements what's written on the slides as well. I'm sure we've all been in presentations where what's presented orally doesn't match what's on the slides, and it can be really confusing and difficult to follow. Okay, next slide, please. And use your voice. Your voice is very powerful. Think about your volume and vary your loudness for emphasis. If you whisper, you can draw attention, or if you use a louder tone, you can show energy in your presentation. And the same with your pace. Adjust your speed to maintain clarity and interest. Speed up if you want to show enthusiasm or passion for your subject, or slow down if you want to stress key points and get a message across to your audience. And with pitch, use a natural pitch variation to highlight those important ideas. And also breathe. It seems obvious, but breathe steadily and deeply. Anxiety in an interview and being nervous in an interview can cause your breathing to speed, and that can affect your voice quality and the quality of your presentation. So pause, take a few deep breaths before starting to calm those nerves, and also use pauses during a presentation. So in between slides, in between sections, to naturally reset your breathing. And if you feel you're going too fast during a presentation, just slow down and breathe. Okay, next slide, please. It's a good idea to have a drink at hand. Ta-da! If you get thirsty during your presentation, it can affect your voice, and it could cause you to stop presenting altogether. So have a drink at hand, and also having a drink gives you that natural pause you might need. If you feel you're getting too nervous, stop, take a drink, and it gives you that reset point. I don't know how true this is, but somebody once said to me to avoid ice cold water because it can constrict your throat and affect your voice. I've not tried it myself, so no idea, but thought I'd throw it in there. And finally, a note about humour. It's been mentioned by Gavin that humour needs to be relaxed and confident. Humour can be brilliant in a presentation. Nicola demonstrated that humour can be used fantastically and it can engage your audience. But if you use humour badly, it heightens senses of awkwardness and anxiety. I'm not funny in real life. I've tried to put jokes in presentations before and it was just too awkward and I did not like it. So I've not used it again. So think about your humor. Think about if you can use it. Think about if it's appropriate to use it. It's not always appropriate in an interview setting where you want to convey a sense of professionality. Okay, next slide, please.
I don't know why I'm going backwards. Sorry, Jem.
That's okay. Hopefully don't go
Okay.
backwards. We're already ahead of time. Okay, so a little note on the reality of gaining employment in this field. And the reality is there's so much competition out there. It's so tough, it's so hard, and we really feel for everybody at the moment, especially for trainee BMS posts and Band 5 posts. The introduction of integrated degrees with placements increased the numbers of graduates already HCPC registered, which reduced the need for training posts out there. When I did my training back in the early 2000s, I applied for 20 odd training posts. There was loads. It's not the way anymore. It's so much more difficult. And biomedical science courses have also grown in popularity, which means the numbers of graduates that are out there is a lot higher. So the number of people competing for posts is a lot more. And it also means there's a lot more graduates in medical lab assistant posts and associate practitioner posts. And this means that labs have started to go towards a grow your own mentality where we invest in MLAs and APs already in our service, which means the number of training posts out there has dwindled even more. We don't want to be negative, but we want it to be transparent so you can manage your expectations and also manage your well-being. You do need to be proactive. You need to ensure you stand out from all the other applicants, but you also need to develop resilience to protect your own mental health. So as you can see on this table, this is data obtained from one of the hospitals in our region. And at the top, there are 2 training posts, and both of those training posts for one post only had over 100 applicants. That's a lot of applicants. So it's really difficult to get those posts. It's really important that you do all of these tips we're giving to stand out, not only to get to interview, but then during your interview as well. Okay, next slide, please. So with this in mind, consider other alternative post registration. Don't just be looking for those training posts. Look for MLA posts, look for associate practitioner posts and bank posts. As mentioned, a lot of labs are growing, having this grow your own mentality. So it's worth looking for these posts where you can, get some skills that you can add to your CV, add to your application for training posts if they come up. And also you're already in the laboratory if a training post comes up. A lot of laboratories keep training posts internal because they know they have a good graduate pool within their MLA and AP pool itself. So that's a good way of getting into a laboratory. Also consider private labs. There's a lot more private labs these days that are looking to employ biomedical scientists. So examples there are Spice or Bioscience, SynLab, Sonic Healthcare. If you do look down that route, remember that we often use alternative terminology in private laboratories. So you might not find these being advertised as biomedical science roles. They might be lab scientists, etc. So do look around. And something to mention is networking is such a valuable tool. We had a speaker at one of our previous CPD sessions that found a PhD opportunity through attending the IBMS Congress. And as well at IBMS Congress, there you will have access to a lot of different companies that you could talk to about opportunities, and a lot of people that work within the NHS and within private laboratories that you can speak to, ask for tips, ask how to get into the sector, etc. So use these as networking tools. Okay, next slide. So knowing how difficult it is to get into the biomedical field, we wanted to end very briefly by touching upon resilience. So resilience is the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. Okay, next slide, please. So how can you develop resilience? Usually it's through practicing something that's known as growth mindset. And growth mindset doesn't come naturally. It takes time to develop and often comes from stopping, taking a breath and reflecting on your experiences. So from an interview perspective, a fixed mindset, you may leave an interview feeling like you're not good enough. What's the point? Why am I even trying this? I never get these job roles. Switch that to a growth mindset where you leave thinking, I'm disappointed I didn't get the job, but this interview's given me some good experience. I'm going to take something from this. I'm going to ask for feedback from the employer and I'm going to reflect upon that feedback so I can perform better in my next interview. And this not only increases your chance of success, but it also helps to protect your mental health because it is tough. Okay, next slide, please. Accept your failures. We've all had interviews that we've not been successful in. I don't think I know anybody that's been successful in every single interview they've been to. We're only human. It's going to happen. And as you've seen, there's a lot of competition for jobs. So it's not really failure. You don't know how many people, other people have gone for that job role. You don't know what experience they have. You could be applying for a trainee position, and a lot of trainee positions these days go out as trainee slash HCPC registered positions. So you don't know if somebody's applied for that job role with a lot of experience already HCPC registered. And same with an MLA position, you don't know if somebody's applied for that role that has 20 years of MLA experience but just wants a change in location. You have no way of knowing. So with that growth mindset, you need to think, what have I learned from this experience? It's not a failure. What have I learned? How am I going to reflect on this and what might I want to do differently? I often get asked from people when they ask for feedback, what did I do wrong? And for a lot of people, it's nothing. They've not done anything wrong at all. It's just that there are people there with different experiences on the day. So it's good to remember that it doesn't mean a negative if you do not get a position. So turn that failure into a success, ask for that feedback, reflect, have that growth mindset. It's really important. Next slide, please. We're all capable of amazing things. We really, really are. And resilience is about recognizing that life can be difficult. We all deal with difficulties. We all have setbacks, and it's really hard. And we're all human, and it will be negative, and we'll have negative emotions and feelings when that happens. But developing a growth mindset and using tools to manage that negativity is the core of resilience. It's having that ability to be able to adapt and grow following adversity through feedback and reflection. It's really, really important to look after your mental health. And with that, good luck to everybody, and we'll open the floor to questions and answers. And apologies again that we ran over, but we didn't want to stop. We thought it was important to spend this time with you.
Thank you, Jem. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Yeah, there's a couple of questions that have gone into the chat and also a couple of comments. Before I go to questions, and if anyone has any questions that haven't been asked already in the Q&A panel, if you want to just pop your hand up and we'll come to them. But I think there's a couple of things I want to pick up from the branch. So I think one of the things was, so I popped into the chat there that I actually started training in 2010. So I joined the NHS in 2008 as an associate practitioner. It was one of the first roles for AP, so the band 4 level, so just beneath a biomedical trainee biomedical scientist. And it took me 2 years to go down the equivalence route, and I actually had up to 9 interviews before I actually got my first job. So it's just to put that into perspective. So that was even quite a while ago before all the new sort of initiatives and grow your own approaches started that Jem's talked about. So it really is important to look for those alternative roles. And the other thing as well is a lot of NHS trusts do put on caps on applications. So I think Laura and Anita have both put on from Sherwood Forest, obviously they're capping their applications at around 100. It is time limited in the NHS, and recruiters don't have a lot of time to shortlist. So we often cap the amount of candidates, go out for a first round of interviews, and if we're not successful, then go back and try and re-interview for a second time round. So it's just to be important about it. So don't wait too long to get your thoughts together, but please don't just jump straight in. Okay. So let's have a look at some of the questions. So if you're considering a year, 2 years in interview before going on to further study, is this worth discussing at interview application? So does Becca want to, I'll just try and find you if you're available. And you can ask your question live. If you can pop your hand up, it might be easier to find you in the candidate list, sorry. There we go. Hi, Becca. Did you want to ask your question? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering. So I know like me and my friends are considering doing a year or two in industry before then going on to further study. Is that something worth mentioning in the interview or application process?
So you're thinking of doing a couple of years in industry, either within an NHS hospital, either as a laboratory assistant or just outside of the sector, and then going on to university to complete your degree. Is that right? Am I understanding that right?
No, like so having a bachelor's and then going on to do a postgraduate degree.
Oh, I understand now. Sorry. Yes. So from my perspective, master's degrees are very useful to set you up for later in your career. It's not something we generally look for in the sort of entry-level biomedical scientist. I'm not sure what other members of the branch would say from their perspective in their trusts, but I wouldn't say it was absolutely essential, but it can set you up. What I would say is, within mind of what Jem talked about, the grow your own approach, what we now have is with the universities, we have level 7 apprenticeships where you can do your master's and postgraduate studies later in your career. So that allows you to sort of get the best of both worlds. You can get into an NHS laboratory, get your experience, and also do an apprenticeship to top up to sort of that master's level and proceed beyond there. Yeah. I noticed that Nick popped a hand up if Nick wants to come in.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to agree with you, Gavin, that I think at, band 5, it's not something that I think people would pay particular attention to, but then it's a nice thing to have in your back pocket kind of as you're progressing to, say, like your band 6 to band 7. I think it's probably worth also thinking about how kind of once you're in employment, if you kind of in your interview, you might talk about what your aspirations are and that you are interested in doing a master's, because potentially that's something that you can find support with from your employer. I mean, I did my master's part-time day release while I was working full-time in the lab. So I think it doesn't have to be an either or. It doesn't have to be kind of, I've done my time in an industry, now I'm going back to education.
Thanks. And Jem?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention as well that there are alternatives to masters within the NHS. So the IBMS does the higher specialist diploma, which is fantastic if your intentions are to be a band 7 within the NHS, because it's not just theoretical knowledge that you learn through that. It's also quality. You do a lot around the quality requirements as a band 7, a lot around the training requirements as a band 7. So it really gives you really sets you up for your role. So it's a lot more role orientated than a master's would be. So I think it's something that you would probably want to get into the career first, get into industry first, and see where you want to head. Do you want to go further in your career, and choose then how you want to further your career by deciding what qualification route to choose? If that makes sense.
Cheers, Jem. Thank you. I hope that's helped, Becca. So I'm just going to open the microphone up for Christabel, who's popped a hand up. Just 1 second.
All right, thank you. Good evening. I just want to ask a quick question, please. What's your advice for foreign trained HCPC registered biomedical scientists who find it difficult getting job roles, especially for, let's say, band 5 roles, because most times in the job description and person specifications usually ask for UK NHS experience. So, what would your advice be for such applicants? Thank you.
Okay. I think a lot of NHS trusts are maybe pivoting towards the use of agency staff. So if you are applying from overseas and you've gone through the equivalence route and you're experienced in working in the sector, so you've got your HCPC registration that's been accepted, and the IBMS have also accepted that, and you can now use the title of biomedical scientist. What I would suggest is registering with an agency to get that, but also really expanding on in your application within the sporting information what you understand how an NHS laboratory works, I think trying to talk to a laboratory that you're applying to understand the pressures they're under, and then tailoring your supporting information with that information on board. I'm just trying to think of examples of how I have a lot of experience of this recruiting within the medical sector when I was a service manager and looking at specialty doctors, and we went through the CSER route. It's about just trying to find individuals that understand things like ISO 15189. Obviously, the move to that from CPA, from Central Pathology accreditation, has meant that we're aligned now to the rest of the world in terms of our accreditation standard, but understanding how pathology networks are made up and how they work together. So that's probably the advice that I would give, is just to contact a laboratory, try and register with an agency, look for those locum posts, because there are plenty out there at the moment, and that will give you your UK experience, but also to, as I say, to look at what experience you earned outside of the NHS and how that would apply within your supporting information and what they're looking for. Jem, have you got anything to expand on that one?
Yeah, I was just going to add in, as I know it's difficult with financial situations, but if you can offer for a bit of shadowing experience, if you can ask to volunteer within a laboratory as well. Like Gavin said, if you approach a laboratory in your area and you ask if there are any opportunities for that. Also, bearing in mind that there are the MLA posts and there are the AP posts. Again, financially, it could be a little bit more difficult, but that would give you that UK experience in the laboratory then as well. So just be mindful of those other posts that are there. But we appreciate it. It's difficult.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay, just 1 second. I'll just have a look. Oh, we've got a couple of hands up as well. So I'll go to Sadie first. Sorry.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
We can, yes, thank you.
Fab. I had a question regarding the supporting information and how you suggested to write that against the person's specification. Does that basically just mean making sure you're hitting all of the points within your supporting information? Or is that more, there's a point in the person's spec, you write about that in your supporting information, then you go to the next point in the spec and you write about that, and it's sort of more in that chronological order?
Yeah, so this is a difficult one to answer because I've come a cropper of this myself through my career, where some employers prefer it in terms of, we've asked for this, we want to see around your qualifications experience, and break it down like that. So qualifications, experience, knowledge, and so forth. So that sort of chronological, or splitting out the categories, as it were. Whereas my personal preference is, with supporting information, is for someone to write a little bit of an essay. And what I would say is, look at what you've got in the person's spec. So if it's asking for your qualifications, that's already answered in the qualifications box on the NHS jobs application. Where it's talking maybe around ability to audit or experience of audit, that could be covered either within your employment history. So if you were doing audits, talk about an audit. And then in supporting information, what I would do is, I have experience of ISO 15189, for example, and I ran an audit entitled a horizontal audit of compliance to the Human Tissue Act. And it gives us a bit of information about yourself. You're going to get full marks for that. And it might be something we actually pick up in an interview with you as well, and just ask around, just if we ask a question around audit, we might say, oh, in your application, you've stated this. Just talk to me more about your audit you performed. But it's just to get a flavour of, when you're scoring, because you've got that range of scores, and every organisation is slightly different, so it doesn't make it easy. But we tend to use it, Derby, just between 0 and 2. So it's very much a case of no, not mentioned, 1 partially mentioned, 2 mentioned with an example, or has fully disclosed it. So it's really just thinking, my personal preferences for that, thinking about what you haven't already disclosed, and then looking at those wider points and trying to bring yourself to life as a bit of a candidate. I think the application number 2 that Nick showed a CV for, I think is really a good summary of where someone brought together the skills they had towards potential shortlisting criteria in the job specification. Does that help?
Yes, fab. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Mercy, I'll go to you next. Sorry, let me just. Hi, Mercy. You're live now? We can't hear you, so if you wanted to pop something into the chat, and we'll try and come across to that for you in a second. Okay, so I'm just going to some of the questions in the Q&A box now. So, do we need to have previous experience for a trainee BMS role? It's not essential, no, but it is ideal. Again, being able to relate back to an experience of working in the laboratory, whether it's an NHS laboratory, private laboratory, is really useful, or even just your undergraduate labs that you may have worked in and been part of. Just talk about what skills you've had. But it really is important, if you haven't got those, as Jen mentioned, maybe trying to do a bit of shadowing or work experience as well, just getting into a laboratory and speaking to people and seeing what happens and reflecting on that in your supporting information. It may not get you the full marks, but it would at least get you some partial marks and would bump you up on the shortlisting, so you hit the minimum criteria for an interview. So I've got here a question. I think we were asked this before the webinar this evening as well. What particular roles can you do apart from biomedical science? What particular roles can you do apart from biomedical scientist degree with an IBMS accredited degree? Again, there are plenty of roles out there. I think LinkedIn is a very good one. If you pop in biomedical science, you'll find a lot of recruiters out there, but you can become biomedical statisticians, do health modeling and all sorts of things. That's if you just pop that into Google, it should come back with quite a few results for you. Sorry. So the next question was the one that we also posed before. If you have no UK work experience, does it lower the probability of passing the recruitment process? It doesn't lower the probability of passing recruitment. It just means that you might need to understand how the UK differs from laboratories abroad. I know, for example, some laboratories, pathology laboratories, are multidisciplinary, so you will work through all the various areas, whereas in the UK you tend to specialise within one area. So again, it's just when you're making that application, talking about what you did when you were in that rotation. So if you had to rotate between biochemistry, hematology, and immunology in a laboratory and histology, and the roles of biochemistry one, well, how often was your role in biochemistry? How many years experience? Just really make that sing in your application. And then Emma has answered the question around if a degree is not accredited by the IBMS, what can you do? We had this question posed to us before the panel as well. What I would say is, if you have a look at the IBMS website, and if you click through to here to professional registration and become a biomedical scientist, it will take you here around the non-IBMS accredited degrees and the routes that you can take. But essentially, it is either getting it assessed by the IBMS. So that would mean getting your university to provide you module descriptors, sending that off to the IBMS with a copy of your module descriptors and transcripts for exactly what you got in each module. They will then assess that at a cost to yourself, to then say what potential additional modules, if or any, you would have to do to get an accredited biomedical science degree. Okay, the other one is if you are applying from outside of the UK and you want to get your degree assessed from outside, it's a very similar application process, but you would go straight to the HCPC for that one because they would be checking your right to practice within the UK. And then once you've got your HCPC, that's when you then apply through the IBMS. But again, all details are on the IBMS website here. And I'll just have a look if we have any more questions there. No, I'm going to have a quick look through the chat. Apologies. There have been a lot of Bing things coming in out of order, so let's have a quick look. So we have one here, persistent international placement, which, okay, that's just a comment, sorry. What is the ideal time of year to be applying to go into a job straight after finishing our degree? I would start your applications maybe in your final semester. So probably around July time was a good time to start applying, because you'll have a good idea of where you're going to exit with your degree. You finished all your modules, you've had an idea of what you got on your final dissertation. So it's a good time to start applying around then. What I wouldn't do is apply in your second year, because obviously you've still got quite a time to finish. your undergraduate degree. One there around, should you apply to be on the HCPC register or wait until a band 5 position? I would apply to get on the HCPC register now, because it can take several months, and a lot of recruiters may actually use the yes or no question if you have HCPC registration as part of the shortlisting criteria, and see whether you can be approved for work for the interview process. Sorry. Locum positions. I don't know any locum agencies off the top of my head, sorry, because they change their names all the time. But again, if you have a quick Google, I think there's ones like World Healthcare or places like that. But yeah, and I think at a skim that has answered most of the questions, I believe. If there are any, please send them to the branch email address, which hopefully everybody can now see on screen. This is the branch here. But if you want to send any questions that I haven't covered or that I've missed out this evening, I do apologise. It's just the chat's very busy, and we are running 40 minutes over schedule. So feel free to send them here, and we'll do our best as a group to answer those emails as they come in. Other than that, I'd like to thank you everybody for attending. A copy of the presentation will be made available on our YouTube channel, which will be advertised on our social media. So if you don't already follow us, please follow us. And then once it's posted, you'll be able to review that at your leisure. Okay. Thank you very much.